Oh my goodness. It's 1:40 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. And I wasn't gonna put a hat on at 1:40 in the morning to cover up my bald head. So this video, I have to speak on it. There's just I have to speak on it. It's hand in hand with the note I just wrote, and because I didn't want to lose any of this information, and I didn't want to write it down. So I'm just gonna say it. I don't want it to be controversial. I don't want people to think I'm diminishing or taking away from what's going on. That is not the point. The point is, I think we need to shift the way we're thinking because the ego is running so rampant on Facebook, on social media, that it's using what should be something that unites us and it's dividing so many of us in a very subtle, very blatant ways. And the reason I say that is for myself, particularly with people posting Black Lives Matter and people posting All Lives Matter. It comes into a post that I just seen recently, where this guy had it was a post of his business for a barbershop. He was Asian American, and then there's a post on some comments that he had written. In a nutshell, he had said he had replied to his friend, uh, "How do what about all the black people that had been killing all the Asians in our community? You know, where was all the justice for that? And how do we know that George Floyd didn't do something or didn't act up and he got what he deserved?" Obviously, I don't agree with what that guy said. But what he said, what he stated was coming from his ego. It wasn't his spirit. It was his ego that did it because that's what the ego is doing right now. It's taking people who post Black Lives Matter. It's a wonderful thing. It's creating awareness for a cause that we need change in our system. But other people who may not be able to empathize with that, they don't have the background for it, are feeling alienated by it. And so their ego is automatically saying, well, doesn't my life matter? I'm not black, but doesn't my life matter? And so with this guy, he's posting, he might have a background where, yeah, some of his friends who are Asian Americans might have died at the hands of African Americans, for whatever reason that it may be. But that's where his background is coming from. Well, I had seen the post, and even though I didn't agree with the post, it was saying to boycott his business. Well, what if he, in turn, because of his ego, turned around and said, well, let's boycott, the African American businesses in the city because African Americans had killed some of the Asian American friends, And so I'm giving it an example that if we don't all take the time to stop, to think, to try to seek understanding with each other, to try to seek an understanding of people's backgrounds through peaceful communication, then the ego is going to run rampant and continue to perpetuate the cycle that's going to keep us divided. Because at the same time, when people post All Lives Matter, people who are in support of Black Lives Matter are saying, hey, you're diminishing the cause. You are part of the problem. And then the ego in turn says, wait, I'm part of the problem? Well, why should I even change the way I think? Why should I even change how I feel? Because now the ego makes that person feel like they're being attacked because there's just not a real communication between people, And then I seen another post of this picture and I agreed with the picture. It had a picture with this boy with a broken arm, African American boy with a broken arm, and the doctor, you're saying, well, this bone is broken, and the doctor started wrapping a bandage around his leg. His arm was broken, but he started wrapping around a bandage on his leg, saying, well, all bones matter. And the African American boy said, well, let's fix the one that's broken first. Completely agree. I thought that was a great visual representation of what it means when people are posting all Black Lives Matter. However, I started thinking, well, what about child sex trafficking or sex trafficking in general? What about world hunger? What about sweatshop workers or people who have to mine diamonds and they're working 16 hours a day for $1 a day in terrible conditions and they're just being exploited? What about those people? Because most of the sweatshop workers are from. Okay, I don't want to say that as a fact, so I don't know. I'm assuming that most sweatshop workers are from Asian countries. Um, and they're probably not African American. So to say, well, let's take the one that's broken, that bone. Well, there's many things that are broken in our society, locally and globally. So which ones do we take care of first? Because even though, yes, right now, um, we're dealing with a cop who had murdered an African American, it doesn't diminish or take away from child sex trafficking. And we can all empathize and agree that child sex trafficking is another broken bone on the body that should be mended. And so which one do we fix first? How do we prioritize that? Do we say, well, this is the most recent thing that's happening, so we need to fix the most recent broken bone, even though there's other broken bones? And then someone, the ego gets involved and says, well, systemic racism isn't recent. It's just now coming to light again. It's as though the wound opened up, but this time, instead of putting a Band-Aid over the wound, we need to actually fix the wound. So, I mean, those are just the subtle ways that the ego continues to take all the little things we're doing, trying to divide us. So I propose that, to make it a more spiritual thing, we start to talk about these issues from a humanity level. In a humanity level, it circumvents the ego, because we're talking about everyone on a human scale, because our spirits all do agree, yes, all lives matter. Of course they do. And people who are posting Black Lives Matter aren't saying that only Black Lives Matter. They also agree that all lives matter. But our egos are dividing us. And so we're not finding common ground. And I think that common ground, to help us bridge that gap, so to speak, where more people can have buy-in, more people can find commonality, more people can empathize with each other, is when we start talking about human issues, all the broken bones on this body that need to be fixed. Not just one broken bone, and not bones that aren't broken that you're trying to mend, when there's broken ones that need to be addressed. But that's why when you start to think of it in terms of that way, you start to shift your thinking, you start to see how, wow, it's not just systemic racism. How would we protest, the end of child sex trafficking or the end of world hunger, and how would politicians actually make that change? That's where the shift occurs mentally and through your heart. That the change has to come on an individual level. It has to be at the individual level, where we change the way we think, which promotes the way that we act, which promotes our belief system, because we act differently. We believe differently because we're experiencing different things. We're able to keep an open mind, honest communication. We're able to be transparent. We're able to ask for forgiveness and give forgiveness. And it's all those qualities that Dr. Martin Luther King has preached while he was alive, and has continued to sow into generations. And we're responsible right now. Yes, is there a race issue going on and that needs to be fixed? Of course there is. But we also need to understand that by putting it in that light, it does reduce the willingness of other individuals to change the way they think, to empathize with that, because they might not have the background to empathize with it. Just like that Asian American who had posted that stuff about, why do Black lives matter now? What about Asian lives? And so I just highly encourage that you seek within yourself those answers. And I would love your feedback. I would love, I love making these videos. It's hard sometimes for my ego to see only a couple views, because I feel like the information is really pertinent. But at the same time, maybe these videos aren't made for this time. Maybe down the road, they'll get more traction when it's more necessary. I don't know. I love you guys. I hope that made some sense for you. I'm in complete support of what's going on right now, but I think there's a better way for us to phrase it in order to circumvent the ego within ourselves, because the ego, again, is what is keeping us divided, is what is plaguing us deliberately and subtly. Okay. I won't even go any further. I need to go to sleep, but I love you guys. Have a good night. I'll talk to you soon. All right. See you.